Darryl, you work both on the guys. You've done it growing up all your life and the girls' side. I know our last few sessions, Darryl, we've really gotten into how do you approach drawing the line in female hockey. We've sort of on the guys' side, we talk about guys being different, and you can approach them differently. They have no fear, and the girls are much more sensitive. So uh, I'm curious, Darryl. You're still actively working with professional men, and you're working with national team girls, or you have been, and you're working with your daughters. So, any comments on that?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing I think is it goes back to the same thing. The common denominator between the working with females and working with males is that there needs to be a set of permissions that are afforded to them in order for, whether it be permissions to fail, whether it be permissions to compete, whether it be permissions to try something new. The difference is, so those permissions I think are common, and they're needed in both sides. The difference is the boys tend to take more liberties with those earlier. So if the permissions are not available or not made or implicitly supply like offered, they'll work around the fringes more aggressively and like test the water a little bit. Where I think the girls, you just need to be more. It just needs to be laid out more clearly because they're less likely to cross lines or work off the. But I still think the permissions and creating those levels of permissions are critical on both sides. Um, whether you're working with pro NHL players, there's still permissions. There's some things they just cannot do in a game. It's just not. That doesn't fit the skill set. The difference is that they'll recognize opportunity and they'll take advantage of those opportunities. They won't do it all the time, but they're looking for a window where they can show, hey, I'm more skilled than maybe you might give me credit for. I know with Ella specifically, I've had to go a long way with her to create some of these permissions, whether it be in training. We went through a whole thing. I was talking before about teaching her how to compete more and harder and bring that to a practice or team setting. And at first she was like, geez, I don't know, like, what are the girls going to think? And I said, well, culturally, you have to figure out whether you in your situation, you have to figure out whether you want to be a driver or whether you want to just be a kosher. If you want to be a kosher, you're not going to be a good hockey player. You need to be a driver. So I'm telling you, you need to compete more. And competition is not a wake up one day, I'm going to compete, and next day I'm not. It's an everyday, all day long thing. And so, yes, you're going to need to compete. And so, what we did was we built some permissions for her in her practices. Now, I'm going back a year because we didn't do anything really this year. But last year, we did a lot of this. And it was, compete really hard against one of your teams. She has one teammate who is really competitive. I said, go against her and compete, like very physical, like drive energy. And then after it's done, skate right over to her and tell her, great job. And see how that's received. And she gets a stick tap on the shin pads. And then next thing you know, they're arranging to go again. And then there was another girl who's not quite as competitive, but could get there. I said, let's go after her now. Get involved, get engaged, get a bit more physical, steal the puck. And instead of stealing the puck and giving it back, steal the puck and take it right to the net. Be aggressive. And that was hard. Like, that was a hard step. But she started to be a driver with this other girl. It's because she needed this other girl, and they began to drive it, and it started to come. It really started to come. But I said to her, you telling me you want to be an elite hockey player? That's what you're telling me. Well, I'm telling you, you don't compete hard enough, and you need to become a driver, and you need to figure out how that can be cool on your team. I don't know how it can be cool. I'm just telling you, there's a few ways you can test it, and then let's see what the response is, and kind of go from there. And that's always been something that over the last year, it's been good. Now she's basically been me, her, and a goalie for the last year. So we just now finally got back into the competitive part. She picked up tennis because I said you need something, an outlet to be more competitive, because you ain't competing against me. I'm way too fat and too old, and you're better than me. So it's not much for competition. So she picked up the tennis, but now we're just now starting to play a little bit more. And I noticed it go right into her game, that she's a if you want to be elite, I haven't met an elite person yet that isn't a driver. So you need to drive. And teaching girls how to be a driver, I think, is tough. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't. I genuinely have no idea. All I know is I'm throwing stuff at her, and I want to see her vet through and see what happens. So that's my long answer on it.
I got a point. Kim, I'm going to ask you, Matt Holmberg, the coach of Queens, who's an ex-lawyer, he addressed this a couple weeks ago. And Kim, I wonder if you would bring up his concept. It was just brilliant. He actually,
just quickly before you get started, where I got my information from, I read a book. I read a book called it's a soccer book, and I forget what it's called. There's a guy, the head coach of the University of North Carolina, who is also like a world-class soccer teacher. I think he coached, I don't know if he coached the Olympics, but definitely national programs. At North Carolina, they won literally everything every year. And he built this thing called the competitive cauldron for his females. And that's where I got the ideas from Drive Ella. It was really to get her to try some of these things, to make it cool to compete on her team, and find the kids who are competitive and get their competitive juices flowing. So go ahead, Kim.
Yeah,
sorry.
his name is Anson Dorrance.
That's right. That's him, Anson Dorrance.
Now, Kim, Sammy, welcome aboard. Matt Holmberg talked about specifically what you're doing, Darryl, and his way worked for him. Kim, go ahead if you don't mind, please, and anybody else that has anything to add. Matt may come on and he'll be able to meet you later and to talk to him more. Kim, please.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I use the concept of a passenger versus a driver all the time. And often I refer to that when I'm speaking to parents and players about what level to play at. So, if they're sort of a bubble player to make AA, but they'd be a driver at A, I think there's a tremendous power in girls, especially in that bantam midget age group, of being a driver instead of being a passenger. So at a junior level, Darryl would know this, having watched midget AA for the last couple of years. There's plenty of girls who could skate up and down the wing or stand on defense and be a passenger at the junior level, who are currently playing midget AA. But to actually have an impact on the game is much, much different, especially at the PWHL level. But I think it's a great concept, because I remember back to my days at Dartmouth, and anyone who's Wally and Tim and Sammy would know Corrine Braden, but she was my teammate at Dartmouth, and she was so much better than me. It wasn't even close when I started, and she became my person. She's 6 foot. I don't know how much she weighs, but she used to pick me up and pin me on the wall. Like, my feet would be in the air. And she was really the only player I ever played against who could do that to me. But she became my one person. She was my barometer, the person I was striving to catch up with. So I'm not sure I was ever quite successful in it, but it sure made me a lot better. But I think in girls hockey, having 17 people with that kind of drive and compete, that you're probably a championship team if you've got that. But I think it's great. And I can, attest to, I sent Darryl a message after his first chat with us about the difference in Ella's game between her first year midget and her second year midget. And I think that corresponds with the year that you were creating these permissions with her. But it was like, transformation is the correct word. Like, she was a good underager first year midget AA, and she was a dominant defenseman in her second year midget AA. So it's really cool to hear as a coach who, I don't know her from Adam as a kid, to actually hear Darryl say, oh, here's what we did and here's the things we tweaked in order to make it happen. I think that's really cool for me to be able to observe, from the outside looking in. So I think it's awesome that he can share those tidbits with us.
So further to that, one of the things that I was talking, so all the way through Ella's life, I've told her, whatever the team practice is, you need to figure out a way to make it your own. So inside the team structure, inside of every drill, you need to figure out what's the purpose of the drill and what can I add to it. So is it a situation where you can add maybe a fake? So maybe it's a simple breakout drill, the puck goes back and you got to go back and get it. Well, every kid's going to go back and get it. There's no pressure, but none of them are going to use a shoulder check. Add a shoulder check because you can see, oh, what's this game situation? I'm going to add something. Oh, we're going around the net and the coach says pass to the winger. I'm not saying pass to the center. If the coach says pass to the winger, you're going to pass the winger, but fake the pass to the center and then pass to the winger. Like, you can add things in, and she became very good at personalizing a practice without changing the practice or having the coach go like, well, you just do it the way I want you to do it. That she never crossed that line. So I had been building that from like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and she became very good at it. Now, when we got to this competitive part, I said, this is exactly the same thing, except it's not adding a skill, it's adding energy. You need to find ways to add energy. So it's a competitive one-on-one drill. How can you add energy? How can you drive the energy on the ice? You need to be a driver, and I need you to mess around with how you can do that. And I think that this is a process, and I don't think this is a wake up one day and you try this. I think this is a process, and it starts with, and I was looking at things that I was doing with her and trying to leverage those into, this is the same thing as what we've been doing, but now we're applying it this way. And it really worked with her. And I think that she's really found much more of that, where she can take a practice and see, that it's doesn't have a lot of energy, and she can become a driver. The other thing that we did was a lot of communication. She's over talking. I said, talk to kids in line. Talk to them. Hey, we're up next. Let's go. Let's drive, and try to build the energy with her teammates. And I've seen her do that, and that's transferred into the game. She's very vocal in a game. So my point is, there's a lot of ways to come at this, but it's not necessarily all about being more competitive. It's about using other tools that once they're built, you could refer to those things and say, all those skills we were working on, that's the same as this, only now instead of building a new skill, you're building an intensity or an energy or a competitiveness, or you're trying to build somebody up, after their rep and they lose the rep and you can tell they're dejected. You have a responsibility. Get over there, talk to them, build them up, get them ready for their next rep. Those things are cool. And I love that part. And it's been a fun process with her. But I think there's lots of ways you can go at it.
Yep. Kim, I was really surprised that you went like sort of a passenger driver, those terms. Matt Holmberg and the topic he brought, and I wanted Danielle Goyette and Tim Bothwell to be alert to this. His concern coaching university hockey initially was the girls are reluctant to push one another, to compete, to be first for the puck, to work harder than somebody. I think Haley Wickenheiser worked too hard. the other players somehow interpreted her effort and her drive as being almost too much, and I looked at it as something that made everybody else better. Matt Holmberg actually had them sign a mock contract giving them permission to compete, to race for the puck, to make contact. And if there was another puck, it was okay. And he had to ask them, if that's okay. Is it okay with you? Are we going to get better? And that mock contract was his way. And Matt is on now. So I'm going to introduce Matt, Darryl. Matt, Darryl Belfry's on today. And he,
Last time I was on, I've met him before.
Okay. Well, then I'll let Matt talk about his contract, because Darryl's talked about getting the girls to be drivers. Our drivers are motivated people that are going to get ahead and get better. And I brought up the point of hopefully you joining us, because your contract that you experimented with made a difference for you. So go ahead, and then Darryl will let you take it from there in terms of what Matt has to say. Go ahead.
Sure. Hey everybody. Yeah, so I mean, and I have to, I don't want to take too much credit for it, because I believe I originally got the idea from an Anson Dorrance book that I read, and how he was getting his female soccer players to compete, and he was facing sort of the same issue that I was, and it wasn't necessarily an issue in terms of the players' internal drive within themselves. They were working hard within themselves. The barrier that I was facing was they were afraid to compete against each other in practice, and it was more a relationship issue between them and their teammates as it was their own internal drive. So if I was having them do a drill on their own, usually the internal motivation is there and they're competing hard. But when I asked them to go into a corner and compete for a puck, I was finding that they were holding off. And a big reason was that they were afraid to piss off their teammates, that they would lessen the relationship with her. And so, again, kind of stealing from Anson Dorrance's idea, we just talked about, okay, this is the only way we're going to get better. We need to compete at this level in practice in order to compete at this level in a game. And let's all agree that by being very physical in a practice, not to the point of injury, but very physical, that's okay. And it's not going to harm our relationships. And so we all basically agreed to that in a mock contract at the beginning of the season. And I find it just laying it out there and having everyone talk about it and putting it out in the open and agreeing upon it made a huge difference.
I know with my daughter, when we started talking about this whole competitive thing, her every question she asked me back was, well, like, what's my team going to think about that? Well, what are my friends going to think about that? How do I do that? And still, like, are they going to be upset? Like, how does that work? And frankly, I don't have any answers. I didn't have a single answer for that. I just said, in the end, I said to her, you're telling me you want to be a great player. Do your actions match your ambition? Because if you're going to go out there and you're not going to put yourself in a situation where you're trying to get the absolute most out of this practice or this training session, or you are not pushing your teammates to get them to be better, you're not going to get better in this environment. You can only do so yourself. And so you need these other kids. And so she did a lot of stuff where she would go, like I said, in the line, or she would be very physical with a teammate, and then she would go after she would talk to them, and she would ask them questions. Like, she would say, like, I'll give you an example. There was one, she got in the car, she was so excited, and she said, did you see that play? And it was a very physical one-on-one where she knocked the girl down, and then the girl got up and did a spin on Ella as Ella was trying to be aggressive, and she ended up getting to the net. So Ella went to her and said, I just love that spin. That was great. I didn't expect you to do that. And she's like, when I said that, she said that whole thing changed, because she said, I think the girl thought I was like being mean because Ella's using a cross check. She's getting physical. She's using body position. And this girl recognized Ella was coming hard and spun off of her. And just a little compliment like, hey, that was a great move. It really did change things. And I said to her, I said, I think you just have to talk to them. Be competitive, but go over and talk to them either before or after, or make a joke about it and say, hey, like, there's no way I'm losing this one. And see, like, try to test the waters. And I didn't know anything about it. All I did was I just tried to push her to try different things. And the thing that worked the most was her talking to them before or after. And that just created a better environment. But she did drive the intensity. Like, there were some tense moments at times. And afterwards, she would say, like, do you think it was too much? I'm like, hell no. Like, I don't think you're getting even close yet. Like, I think you got to get even more. But for her, it was like just trying to inch along. But the getting it out in the open, the talking about it, but there absolutely has to be permission, because a lot of these kids, like, they've never been in a practice like that. They've never really done that. They've never had anybody do that. And so it was definitely foreign, which maybe is kind of Kim's spot, where it's like, when you have the whole organization, try to introduce it younger. Maybe they just grow up with it. It's better. But when we were doing it when they were already a midget. They're like, whoa, hey, whoa. What is this? Like, tone her back. We're here to just get wet and shoot some pucks, have some fun. What are we doing? And by being a driver, it was very interesting to see what was going on.
Darryl, I just wanted to mention guys hockey. If you have a fight at practice, and whether it's pro or college that I was in, you were getting there. You were where you wanted to be as a team. When you could push each other seriously that hard. And that's something that I think we're not suggesting girls fighting or condoning fighting, but that line of aggressiveness, the using of vocabulary, assertiveness, that's something that's a challenge in coaching. And I'm really glad you brought it up. Now, Kim, your hand's up. Okay.
Yeah, I actually had a question for Matt, and I guess it spills over to Darryl as well. Like, given the lack of physicality, or the lack of players in the female game who have that, that excitedness or that enthusiasm to fight for dirty ice or high traffic ice, right? Everyone accepts the outside, everyone wants to have a fancy toe drag, but no one wants to create, initiate contact and create chaos. Like, does that factor in, Matt? And I guess Danielle would be the same question. Does that factor in your recruiting now, right? I would guess 10, 15 years ago, you're prioritizing skill, right, a little bit more than this side of it. But it sounds like, and in the the college hockey games I've watched recently, it's still missing. And the players who have it, even if they're not as skilled, actually perform much better than the higher skill players. So I'm curious, Matt, if it factors into your recruiting now as a higher priority than it did 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, short answer is yes, absolutely. And I think that there's a million different reasons, but the short answer is yes. I think that players are defending better, so pure skill alone won't get you by. At some point, you're going to have to fight for it. Team systems are better, I think, so they're defending the house a lot better. So you're going to have to get in there and get after those loose pucks. I think training is better. I just think that people are bigger and stronger. So you're going to have to be able to push back against that. So yeah, and I think it goes hand in hand. I think a strong mental will to compete. Like, competing doesn't have to necessarily equal physicality, but they sort of do go hand in hand. So if we can find a player with good skill, but she's not afraid to be physical, then she's also usually at that point also a very competitive person. So yeah, I think you nailed it. I think the last 5 years in particular, it's shifted quite a bit in favor of that compete level. Yeah.
I said to Ella, it's a competitive advantage. If you are physical and you learn to be physical and you learn to be competitive, this is a competitive advantage because I saw the same thing that Kim's talking about. I see on the way up that there's a lot of situations, whether it be college hockey or even like once you get into like, oh, not like not the national team in Canada necessarily, but on the national level amongst all the countries, there is a clear physical advantage that's being imposed between one country and another. And I said to Ella, if you telling me you want to find your way into a spot, heat, then do you need to add this? Because this is a competitive advantage. You're going to need to find a way to, when there's a race for a puck, you're not racing for the puck. You're racing for the line to the puck. And you're learning how to use your body in a different way. Or when someone comes to the net front, that they're greeted with contact in some way. You have to figure out what that looks like. And I remember one of her best questions she asked me was, how much is too much? Like, how do I know I've crossed the line? Like, where is the line? And I told her, I said, if you're not creating tension, you're not probably doing enough. There should be some tension. And at some point in a practice, at some point in a game, like we're lucky in Ontario, like every game that Ella's going to play against in the PWHL, she's going to play against an elite player. There's somebody's good on the other team that's considered an elite player. And I said, you need to find your way over to that elite player and you need to be physical and you need to create tension and find out what that response is going to be. You'll see it right away. And there's some kids will take the long route and there's some kids that come right back after you. You need to create that tension. If you really want to be good, if you really want to find your way into the top, this is a competitive advantage and you could bulldoze your way there with a lot of this type of stuff with your skill. Like without skill, it doesn't matter. But if you have great skill and you're really competitive and you do it as a habit, not a every once in a while thing, or when someone pisses you off, this is an everyday deal for you. To me, that's a competitive advantage. But it takes years to build that. That's why I started 2 years ago to try to get this going.
The other thing I'll just add is, and this is purely anecdotal, but it feels to me over the last 5 years that a lot more refs at our level are letting more of the physical stuff go. So that also plays into it.
Ella, honestly, I videotape all her games. She had one game where she administered 17 cross checks in a game and did not get a single penalty. 17 cross, 2 of which were at the net front, which were on the side of the poor girl that she gave, like on the ribs, which put the girl to the actual ground. Not a single penalty. And Ella's like, what should I do? I said, well, I'm disappointed in the 3. Like you had 17, but there were maybe 2 or 3 others times where I felt like you could give another one in. Like, keep going. Well, let's go. Find out what that is. It's an exploration. You're exploring and you're trying to figure it out. And I think that those are like, part of it is that permission to explore and see, like, what does that look like? And I think trying to encourage them to do that is so important, especially with this physicality thing. Exploring it is really important.
I also think it's critical, like, it's a great point you made about the refs, Matt. I was going to say, that is always the issue, especially at younger ages and with bigger, more physical players, right? As they feel, again, that sense of team, they don't want to put their team at a disadvantage, right? So if they're getting, what I would call big girl penalties, right? They feel as if they're taking away from the team. So I think it's really important as a coach how you message that. I have a player who's going to be playing against Matt next year, who is big and physical and extremely skilled. And in midget AA, she just scored by running everyone over. She had great dangles, great everything, but she was so big, so like, she's got a 6-pack and, guns and the whole thing, right? And she would just run people over. Then she got to the PWHL level and it didn't work as well because her skill level didn't trump everyone else's. But, I made it was very clear to me her teammates would sort of get annoyed when she got penalties, and I just made a deal with her. I said, a penalty for every goal, please. You get as many penalties as you want as long as you score a goal for every penalty you take. And she loves it. I still, she'll be gone next year and off to Waterloo, but that's my contract with her. So I think it's really important as coaches, and it goes back to that idea of permissions, right? If in girls hockey, every time you take a penalty because someone's being physical and prioritizing physicality, if you put a negative spin on that, then of course the girl's not going to do it, right? And obviously how her teammates feel about it as well. But girls love the penalty kill. I don't know what it is, but they all want to be on the penalty kill. So I always look at that as not such a bad thing either.
Kim,
just wait, Wally. I just want to tell a story. I'm not sure you're gonna remember, and maybe Tim was coaching too at the Oval. But we had like Colleen Sustrick, like Sosk, we call like on defense, like crazy tough, like fat, 5'5", I think, but built like a farm girls and from Saskatchewan, and I was the skilled player from Quebec, not playing too physical. And Wally, I don't know if you remember, but you talked to Sostrick and you said every time go for a skill practice and anything, I want you to go against her and be physical with her. And I think it was your way to teach me how to be more physical, going against the more physical player on their team. Trust me, sometimes you learn the hard way, but it's a good way because this is something I did after, like with the national team. I always go against the best defenseman. And another one was Therese Brisson. Oh my God, like was crazy. She was protecting their goalies like crazy. But at one point I went at Therese went at me like really like crossing the line. She was the kind of player that crossed the line on the ice, and I went at her. But after that, it was over. Like we knew what the expectation and the way we had to play or practice to be able to win World Championship and Olympics. And that's the kind of players you need on your team to push your players, because if you don't have that, it's pretty hard to be a championship team.
Richard Berkeson.
This is really interesting. As a relative newbie to the girls' side, watching the coaches, I think I've mentioned before, watching the coaches, particularly from September to November before we really got shut down, and how soft the practice approach was. And I guess like anything else in coaching, we have to feel our way around what's going to work and not work. So, what Darryl does with his daughter is worlds apart from what somebody is going to do with a team of U13 double Bs or U15 A-level girls. I'm just wondering what, particularly when most of the coaches are